also like to do would be to welcome Jacqueline as well. We really appreciate her being here. And it's really just going to be a conversation between Jackie and I. So Jackie, who is Jackie?
So once again, good morning and thank you very much for the invitation. I have been Catholic for all of my 49 years and Mass is usually at 12 o'clock for me. So my local priest is going to be shocked that I made it here by 9 o'clock. So I think he'll expect to see me at 10 o'clock for 10 o'clock service and not 12 noon. So who is Jacqueline? So I am Kenyan born. I'm a human rights lawyer and I've been a human rights lawyer now for some 25 years. I've always thought that I lacked the patience to teach, or at least I thought that when I was younger. But I'm now a lecturer. I lecture at Queen Mary University, and the course that I'm lecturing on is politics, advocacy, and influencing change. So really focusing on social justice. In addition to being a human rights lawyer, I do a lot of leadership training for executives. But along the way I discovered that the more successful you get, the more support that you're given. But actually it is the young people who really do your skills. And so I spend my time not just with development for established professionals, but also for young people between the age of 30 and 35. I was surprised that 35 is still considered young. But there you go. In addition to that, I am involved as a consultant and special advisor. The special advisor bit my mother really likes, but she thinks that I'm working at the White House, which I'm not. fancy title, but consultant and special advisor, helping organizations think about equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. In addition to that, I sit on several boards, and I think the one that you might be familiar with is Comic Relief. I've been on the board of Comic Relief now for almost 5 years. And there's lots more actually that I do, but it's a mouthful even for myself to repeat it. But at the core of all that I seek to do, I think is centered around social justice. I believe that my purpose that God has given to me is to support individuals and organizations to fulfill their potential. So we're very limited resource. I can't really do much on my own, but I believe that inherent in all of us is the ability to change things, to create a more equitable society. So sorry for the long introduction.
That's fine, Jackie. I think, as you can see, Jackie has a really wonderful background, especially in the space of race relations, which is why we felt it appropriate for her to share her story here with us. I think it's good to mention also that we would have a question and answer session that will be after the service during tea and coffee. Jacqueline will be making herself available for all the many questions that you're going to have. Okay? And of course the aim of this as well is to make sure that we have some sort of call to action. How can we as individuals play a role that can help with race relations. Okay. So Jackie, so you've given us a quick introduction of yourself there. What would you say, what drove you into the human rights space? What was the trigger?
I think it's nurture. I always say that everybody has got privilege and disadvantage, but I had the privilege of growing up in a home with both of my parents were professionals. My father was a lawyer, my mother is a recently retired nurse, and they've always worked in the community. I remember my relatives would ask my mom why she bothers to work in the slums with all these dirty, messy, dangerous people. And she just couldn't respond, so she would work the whole week at Martin, so we called it a hospital, on the weekend. She'd be working up and down the country. My father was involved in social justice in terms of teaching, lecturing the law, using his voice and his platform. So I think, I don't really have an answer, but asking me anything that I was influenced by what I saw around me. So I suppose that were my role models, an example that you shouldn't leave for yourself. There is something outside our homes and our businesses, etc. So I think that was the trigger. And I know when I was very young, I was about 8 years old, You know, unfortunately the world hasn't changed. Human beings are the problem, but we are also the solution. There was also conflict as I was growing up in different parts of the world. And I would pray to God that I should just grow up really quickly and I was going to solve everything. Can you imagine little me at 8 years old, poverty, hunger, war? All I had to do was to just grow up. I mean, of course, that was very naive. But I think those were the inklings. It's what I read, what I had around the home. I had interesting role models for that age. I mean, of course, all the popular musicians of the time, New Edition, Janet Jackson, but I didn't know about Mother Teresa. I knew about Malcolm X, etc. So I knew about social justice, and there was injustice in the world and in my community. And I think that was the trigger. But did I know that I was going to be a human rights lawyer? No. I knew I was going to be a lawyer, but I'd probably go into the corporate world.
Right.
But whilst I was doing my pupillage to become a barrister in this country, I stumbled on a human rights case, an asylum case, and that changed the trajectory of my life, and I haven't looked back since.
Awesome. That's really great,
Yes.
Jackie. Yeah. So it's sort of driven by your environment that you found yourself in.
Yes.
And that's where you got the inspiration there to explore it further. Yeah. So through your career as a human rights lawyer, would you be able to give us some examples of some of the cases that you have sort of been involved in, and how that might help our audience to get a feel of, you know, race relations, human rights space?
Soil work means that I have the opportunity and the pleasure to meet people from all walks of life, from around the world. And I hope that that improves my legal perspective, because usually you just focus on what's going on with you. So that's a real pleasure and privilege to meet people who are exceptional, really, really exceptional. If you watch the news, if you read newspapers, if you hear conversation, you might be inclined to think that immigrants are here to cause trouble, take our jobs, etc. But these are extraordinary people who flee for their lives, for various reasons. It took me about an hour to come here this morning, and that was quite a journey. But can you imagine having to flee with your young children and come and seek sanctuary in the United Kingdom? So the kind of cases that I deal with, sometimes people who are fleeing persecution on the basis of their religious faith. So can you imagine here at St. John the Baptist, if for some reason being Catholic was banned, and it meant that your life would be at risk? These are the kind of people that I encounter. I also encounter the kind of work whereby, and that kind of work, my role is to persuade the Home Office, and if we go through the Home Office, then we go to the Immigration Court, to allow those people to stay here and to have safe sanctuary. But we also have our own human rights violations here in our own borders. And I can think about being involved in lobbying work around domestic abuse. So for many, many years, domestic abuse was just deemed as physical abuse. But through our work to lobby here in the community, the law was changed, and now domestic abuse can mean coercion, financial control, psychological harm, etc. And that's some of the work that I've been involved in. And that is working in communities to get people to come and give qualitative evidence, their encounter with domestic abuse. And as I said, human beings have got a great capacity for good, but we also do some really terrible things. It's to support those kind of people to get into safety, especially when they're immigrants and they don't have an immigration status. They have no right to security and have no recourse to public funding. That means that they're very unlikely to live an inclusive relationship, because that is where they're getting food and shelter and support for their families. So that's the kind of work that I do that begins with dealing with individuals in my office, and then doing more work with government to persuade them to rethink their policies. The United Kingdom was really instrumental in terms of the Human Rights Act. Really, really instrumental. That's something we should all be proud of if we're living in this show, and it is important that we uphold this.
No, that's really, thank you for sharing that, Jacqueline, because I think, like many of us, we don't often get to hear these stories, especially to that depth. in the media. You know, the media doesn't quite portray these stories in a way that would help us to gain a better understanding of really the plight that immigrants go through in this country.
I think I'm going to interrupt you because I think maybe I'm making it so it's mainly just immigrants. But those who are also, I suppose, Black British and have been born and brought here, brought up here, second, third generation, this is their home. I still have a strong connection. I'm both Kenyan and British. There's some people who are just British is the only one that they know. And unfortunately, because of the colour of their skin, they receive really appalling treatment at work. And that's all the work that I do as well. And discrimination comes in many forms, not just in terms of spoken about religion, it comes in terms of race, in terms of sexual orientation. Even women who are pregnant face discrimination. Those who relate to real life.
No.
So that's part of the
Absolutely, yes. There's broader things here,
yes.
just immigrants. And I certainly resonate with that, you know, being of Ghanaian heritage myself, born in this country. So yeah, there's some where you're coming from there. And I guess, you know, the thing about this conversation that we're having, I find myself having this conversation, this sort of panel conversation for the first time in the church. So normally I'm speaking at conferences internationally. So it's really a very, very different experience having this conversation within the church, because now we're sort of thinking about how can we bring our faith into all of this. You know, how can we leverage our faith so we can conduct ourselves in a way that can really help improve on race relations. So that's really, you know, why we're having this conversation here at church. So let's talk about your experiences, Jacqueline, your living experiences from your perspective. How has that looked like from a race perspective?
Yes, so
It's a deeper question there, isn't it?
Yes,
A bit more personal
yes.
for you, but yeah.
So I'll begin by saying this is my first time to speak about race in the church. You should be very proud of yourself. This is very, very progressive. So it's the first time. I was very nervous coming here. And you might be complaining later on. You're expecting a sermon and then it's Cyril, and I hope you won't complain. But if you do, you know, change is difficult. So this is very normal. So congratulations and clap to everybody that did this. And it is encouraging because change should begin in our homes, in our churches, and where we are. So I came to Kenya one day after my 20th birthday, and my view of the United Kingdom is what I had seen on television and what I read in books. I thought everywhere looked like it's going to look like Buckingham Palace. We definitely wouldn't. So that really changed my perspective immediately. I had actually never thought of myself as being black. Because when I grew up in Kenya, and I grew up in Nairobi, Nairobi is very diverse. Most people are black. But we also have all the UN bodies working in Kenya. So a lot of people, you know, we were colonized by the British, and a lot of them have settled. The weather is very good in Kenya, you must visit. So many of them have stayed because they've got property and business. There's a large white population. There's a very large Asian Indian population who came to build the railway. And actually, just in the past 2 years, we now have a 46th tribe. And our 46th tribe is Indian Kenyans, because we acknowledge that they're just Kenyan, they're part of us. It's a way of saying they're just one of us. So I came here thinking about race and race issues, something that maybe happens in America. And I didn't actually have unpleasant experiences. But yes, I think being black does make you stand out. I mean, I am this color, I love this color. When people say that I don't see color, it is confusing because I am this particular color. But it means that sometimes when I go to some department stores to go shopping, I get an escort. Could you imagine that? Someone is following you around the store, watching your every move, watching you very, very closely. And if you stop by the mirror and you're looking at what you bought, other shoppers might begin to hold their shopping a little bit closer. It's deeply unpleasant.
Yeah.
Deeply unpleasant. It's not happening to other people. And that makes it a very unpleasant experience to be singled out and for this to be led by some sort of bias and stereotypes. That's deeply, deeply unpleasant. Or sometimes you go to a workplace
and an issue comes up, and it's touching on racism. And then people say, oh, well, Jackie, you're okay, you're one of us, not like the rest of them. And I'm like, come on, the rest of them. The rest of them are just like me. So you'll single me out and make me feel special, and then the rest of them. It's like saying, oh, Father, you're okay, but not the rest of the congregation. And that's, you now see how it feels. It's very, very isolating. And small and big things, I'm going to talk about the microaggressions. We all have different food, and we eat different food. And seeing some of my colleagues at various offices warming their food in the oven, and people responding, remarking, and saying, what is that stench? And this is your food. You know, it's difficult, and then you have to go to work, continue going to work, etc. I remember during COVID, during lockdown, and they just allowed us to begin meeting family and friends outdoors, and you could meet only one other designated family member. So I met my sister and my nephew, and we had a picnic, and my cousin was going to the play area. And I don't know how to explain, it's like a bouncing castle, but in the round. I'll show you pictures later. So we were waiting our turn. It was all fine, having a chat, watching other children enjoying themselves, and we got to the front of the queue. As we got to the front of the queue, those who were bouncing and playing around came and took their bags and their sunglasses, looked at us and then took their bags and sunglasses and went away. It was deeply upsetting. It was one thing to happen to me. I'm big enough, bad enough, and old enough, but then I should have to take it. But my nephew at the time was only 7 years old. He had no idea what was going on. And those poor children also had no idea what they're doing. And when I talk about nurture and the nature, some of us put this idea in their head. They didn't just grow up like this. It's something maybe their parents have said or something in school. And I really felt frustrated, but also hopeless, because I didn't feel I could say something to them. Because they're really young, and I looked at their parents in desperation, and the parents felt very uncomfortable. But this is the lived experience. Going off to Parliament to do the work around social justice, going with members of Parliament, and seeing them being stopped and being asked, are you the cleaner? Is it because I'm black? Why have you not stopped and asked anybody else? I do work with a lot of young people. So first of all, I begin by saying, when the police have stopped me in the past, they're being very pleasant. So I think it's good to have disclosure. Good evening, Mom, how's it going? Blah, blah, a bit of banter. And they say, get home safely. That's not always the case, especially for young black men, for black men who drive particular types of vehicles. You know, to be stopped and questioned and searched for no apparent reason, but for the reason that you're black and you could be up to something. Again, this is to do with stereotypes, etc. I had the pleasure to be in the maternity ward when my sister was giving birth. And of course, birth is beautiful, but also very painful, etc. And we waited for 3 hours before a doctor came, and we've been promised a doctor to come every 5 minutes or so, but no one showed up. And she gave birth, and they left her there. We had to clean her up ourselves. I only then found out that if you're black, you have a 4 times higher chance of dying during childbirth. Those are the statistics. And in that kind of hospital situation, I didn't think about it then, but you're not going to complain because they're the caregivers. If you complain, you're kind of jeopardizing yourself. But this is the lived experience. So it can be quite difficult that you're walking and living with this every day. Going to church, going to work, carrying on with everything, but then there is this cloud and this difficulty in terms of how you're treated and how you're perceived.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jackie. I think it takes a great deal of courage to open up on such stories, isn't it? And as we listen to Jackie's stories, we're asking ourselves, so what role can we play as individuals? This is really the key question here. I think it's a good way to kind of bring this to a close. What would that call of action look like from each of us, from this point? Maybe I'll get your thoughts on that, Jackie. what do you think from a faith perspective? What are the kind of actions that we could be taking to help improve race relations?
So first of all, I'll give you my experience with faith and being Catholic. So I grew up Catholic. I went to Mass every Sunday. I helped with saying the readings from the age of 9. I'm a Eucharistic priest at my church. And my faith has been really important in happy times and difficult times. But I really realized the importance of faith and comfort when my father died, because that is where we felt the embrace of the congregation, of the church, etc. And my father, bless him, couldn't always come to Mass, but he would always check that you went to Mass. So church is a place of refuge and should be a place of refuge and safety and security. When I look at Auntie Grace's work, I would say that perhaps some of the stories that I've shared with you today, you've not had before, or if you've heard about them, they haven't happened to you, people within your social circle. So you're apathetic, this is happening somewhere else. That could be your first reaction. And then you might realize, as Cyril has said, that being Black and Ghanaian, that he has experienced some of this. So maybe it's getting a little bit closer to home. Then you might question yourself and say, oh well, I'm not racist. So I actually don't understand why Father has dedicated half an hour to tell us all about this, because we're not racist. We don't have those kind of thoughts. We're not going to do these dreadful things to people. And that is fine. But during the first reading, I had 2 words mentioned that struck a chord: reconciliation and being ambassadors. So I think it's a journey from being apathetic to saying I am non-racist. But then being non-racist means that you do nothing. You're waiting for somebody else, like some sort of superhero to come from somewhere and solve these problems that we have within society, and that's not going to happen. I can guarantee you God descended today under the first word to fate, but He has put all of you here in close proximity for us to support ourselves in our journey with faith and dealing with difficult issues, etc. So my call would be an encouragement to be anti-racist. That means that you're doing something, not just sitting back and saying, does it affect me? But actually, what can I do? And that can be a really big question. So first of all, I'm going to give you the warning. This is very uncomfortable. It will be uncomfortable for you as well. But nothing good comes easy. And perhaps I can look at the examples of where we might be able to intervene. I think the first thing would be about having greater awareness. And I would hope that this conversation might be an encouragement for perhaps for you to go and Google or to read about what racism means and the structures that have built this. And unfortunately, our beloved church is part of that structure. So acknowledging that particular history. So I would say raising awareness. If I would share a book, and I'm sure maybe we can share resources later, there's a book by somebody called Dr. Shola Moshe, and it says, "This is why I resist." It's a very good book that's very simple to follow, that lets you know more about the lived experience, but also about what you can do. So what you can do, I think, is to have awareness. If you've got grandchildren or children, what are they reading? It mustn't be about racism, it could be about racism, but are you giving them a chance to read authors from different kind of backgrounds? So they realize that people, if you're Asian, if you're African, you have a history from the Caribbean. There is something, we tell beautiful stories. What kind of toys? So that, I don't know what situation like I had in the playground. Because where are they going to learn? Either they learn from the world, which can be quite racist, or they can learn from you in their homes. The television shows, the cartoons that they watch, etc. It is more to be exposing ourselves and others to, on a very, very simple basis. If you see me having a personal escort, if you feel safe, come and say hello, and perhaps ask the person who is escorting me around, is everything okay? That would make me feel reassured. If you see something that's happened in the press that is about racism, like when George Floyd was murdered, You might want to send a message on a telephone call to someone that you know is black and say, how are you? I just read this. How are you coping? Just, again, reassurance. As I said, the church is a place of reassurance and compassion. With the difficulties that have been going on in the world, in Israel and in Palestine, I took a week of silence because emotions were running high. It's a very delicate situation. But after a week, I did call my Jewish friends and my Palestinian contacts and colleagues, or send on WhatsApp and said, hello, I hope your family and friends are safe. I am thinking about you in these difficult times. And if you would like to chat about anything, including rant about what's going on, I am available. And just know that I stand with you. I stand for peace. And you can notice that I'm avoiding the politics around it. I'm not making it about religion, about politics, I'm making it about humanity. And some of them have written back to me and called and said, thank you for thinking about me. And there are horrible things going on around the world every day around race. And Cyril and I just walk out and we smile and we carry on. But sometimes having the empathy will be important. I think back about an incident, and I'd gone to mass, actually it was online mass, an online mass meant I could pray in my congregation and go to another congregation. And it was after the Black Lives Matter and pulling down statues, and you may be pro or against that, but there was a conversation in the press about pulling down Churchill's statue. So we're at mass, and the priest during his homily says he doesn't care what is going on, but Churchill is a hero and this is really, really important and everybody else really should stop all this nonsense. So I thought to myself, this is quite strange, this is what we're talking about during our homily. But then I stopped and I said, this is a really difficult time for race issues. And I've come to Mass for comfort, and this is what I'm hearing. And I do acknowledge that Churchill is a very important and respected political leader. And he's also responsible for some serious atrocities in Kenya, in India, in Ireland, murder, rape, some really difficult stuff that you don't expect to hear at Mass on a Sunday. So I listened to all of this, and after the service, I sent a WhatsApp message. I said, Father, that was very difficult. I came to online Mass for comfort. It's a place I want to go for an hour now on the court and receive comfort. And to hear that was very difficult. But maybe you're not aware. Because I always like to assume this, well, unless you're like outright racist wearing a hood like the Ku Klux Klan, I'd like to assume that you don't actually know. I said, maybe you're not aware. And I sent him some information to look at. Now, unfortunately, he did not come back to me. But what I'm saying is about being mindful and having love. When I remained quiet for 1 week, I was quiet because I was mindful. And so, in our congregation, we all come from various places, not to be silent, but to just remember we should be operating, congregating, and sharing from a place of love. Some of you might still be at work, but you might be retired and do volunteering. You might look and see the places that you're volunteering, your workplaces. How many black people do you see working there? How are they treated? Is your workplace doing anything around this particular area? Believe me, it is a lot easier if you mention it because you have the privilege of being white. It's not something to be ashamed of. Don't be ashamed and feel like, oh God, now they've come to point fingers at me. No, you're white, I'm black, we're happy with who we are. But if it means that you have the privilege to be able to say, what are we doing with regards to anti-racism? It's a lot better than the person who is going through a hard time to have to go and advocate for themselves. It's about being an ally and being supportive. What can we do about this? If you're able to, again, if you're black, sometimes you don't get the opportunity that you require. If you're able to mentor a young person or to open an opportunity for them, that means that you're shifting the dial. You won't change the world, but you're changing the landscape within which you operate. So there are many different intercessions that you can intercede and create change. But I think it's about creating awareness, living our values as Catholics, and looking for opportunities within our homes, our communities, within the church, where we work, etc., to actually say, can we do better? How can we do better? And why is it that all the black people in the lower level of their organization, but not spread across the whole organization? Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how we speak to them and learn about this difficult issue. So I would say, use your privilege. Although being marginalized because of my color, I also have privilege. I have privilege, as I said, privilege of a solid, loving upbringing. I have privilege of being a professional. And we're very fickle human beings. To look at human rights lawyer, they might think I'm like Mrs. Cluey, but I'm not like Mrs. Cluey. I'm very humble, I don't have that background. But because I have this particular role, that means that people do listen to me. When they hear that I'm a trustee at Common Belief, it means that they also listen to me. And you also have that privilege. You have that privilege of being white, being male, being heterosexual, means that people are more likely to listen to you and to think about the difference. And you can all use that privilege. So when I say, don't think that privilege means that now you should be ashamed of being white or being male or something else. No, I'm really proud of who I am. I was born, I'm really happy. But what can I use this position to do something? And I can tell that I'm speaking for way too long. I can see Cyril getting a little bit nervous. So I'm going to stop there. We do have the Q&A, but it's to look to see the little things that we can do in everyday life, and then look at the bigger things. You look at the bigger things, you're perhaps expecting government or the community to do something. But what can we do as human beings to lead our faith? Have the awareness, have the empathy, do something, raise your head above the parapet. It's going to be difficult, I can definitely assure you, but doing the right thing is doing the right thing, even if it's difficult. So I think I'll stop
Thank you,
there.
Jack. Thank you, Jack. As you said, we could talk for much longer, right, on this topic, but we're constrained with time. But that's a really inspiring call to action that we can take away from this conversation. Jacqueline has shared. She has demonstrated a lot of courage, as she usually does anyway. It comes naturally for her to share some really deep personal stories around race. And so let's pray, continue to pray for each other, that we go out there to be disciples of Jesus Christ, and in the process help to improve race relations. So let's give a round of applause again for Jacqueline.